We're joined now by Senator Elizabeth Warren, a Democrat of Massachusetts, who wants to reintroduce Glass-Steagall, the Depression-era bill that separated investment banks from commercial banks. Senator, why do you want to do that?
Well, let's just remember the history. Great Depression, everything crashed apart, and in 1933, one of the solutions was to put in place a wall. This was Glass-Steagall, between ordinary banking, checking accounts, savings accounts, and the risk-taking you do on Wall Street. Big wall. And it stayed in place for 50 years, and we didn't have any of the banking crises. It all kind of worked. And then what happened, though, is the banks wanted access to the profits you get from taking those risks, and the risk takers wanted access to the money in those checking accounts and savings accounts.
The insured deposits. That's
right, the insured deposits, and so they started hammering on Washington to weaken the regulations. The regulators started creating loopholes in Glass-Steagall, and then in 1999, ultimately Congress just got rid of what was left of it. As you know, we had the big crash in 2008. And one of the things we talked about then, lots of people talked about, is that there was too much concentration in the banking industry. Well, here's the problem. Today, the big banks, the big four, are 30% bigger than they were in 2008. And so what this is about is to say, we got to have that wall in place again. Go take your risks, go do what you want to do on the investment side. But the banking side, it needs to stay boring. And those insured deposits need to stay off limits for the risk takers.
But as you know, you're already hearing from critics who are saying that had Glass-Steagall been in place in 2008, it would not have prevented the financial crisis, that the companies that failed were Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, Countrywide.
The companies we bailed out were Citibank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. Those are the ones who got the big TARP money. Too big to fail is something that's going to take a lot of pieces to be able to solve it. I don't kid myself on that. Dodd-Frank is part of that. It's dialed some of the risk out of the system. We're getting higher capital requirements, which I think is really good. But the point is, it takes more. And what this is about is one more way to bring down the size of the largest integrated financial institutions and separate them out so the risky part is separated from what should be the boring part. It's one tool in the toolbox, an important tool, but it's just one tool in the toolbox.
So operationally, you would do what? You would break them apart so the investment banking division of, say, Citi or Bank of America, Merrill Lynch would have to be spun out and separated from the commercial bank.
That's exactly right. And we give them 5 years to do it. So it's not like you flip a switch. It's in the bill. And they'd have 5 years to be able to smooth a path to get those two separated from each other.
What about the prospects for the legislation? You have four co-sponsors. Three co-sponsors already. Are you getting any interest from any other senators?
Oh, we are.
Bipartisan, Republican and Democrat?
But I have to tell you, here's the fun part. My co-sponsor on this is John McCain. You couldn't ask for a better fighter to get out there and really, be willing to get in there on it. And I want to say on John McCain, he's been on this issue about Glass-Steagall for a long time. I was too before I ever came to the United States Senate. So the first time we ever had a chance to sit down, this was our moment to get together and talk about it. And we decided on the spot to work together on Glass-Steagall. We've got Angus King, an independent from Maine. We've got Maria Cantwell from Washington. And here's what's interesting. We decided we're going to fight for this. We've already started receiving calls from other Senate offices saying they want to be part of it too, and that's from both sides of the aisle.
What about over on the House side?
So right now we're concentrating on the Senate side, but I think we've got a lot of friends over on the House side. And that's the thing about Glass-Steagall, and that's the point here. This isn't Democrats are on one side and Republicans are on the other. This is one that really crosses the aisle. This is a question, fundamentally, if people want to take risks, financial institutions want to get out there and they want to gamble on derivatives or on swaps or on whatever exotic thing that someone's created. This doesn't say they can't do it. It just says you don't get taxpayer-backed money to do it. not our checking accounts, savings accounts that are insured by the FDIC. These are two very different kinds of financial businesses. And so commercial banking should be walled off.
Doesn't the Volcker rule do some of that?
It does some of it. I think you look at it the right way. It's some of it. It's just not enough. Okay, and remember, we don't even have a good, strong Volcker rule in place yet. This one says, create a wall. Everybody will understand then, and let's get these two separated from each other.
Finally, to get something like this signed into law, you need a friend in the White House as well. Have you heard anything from the White House at this point? Does the president support this?
I haven't asked yet, but I think the real point is just to get out there and keep talking about the logic of it. I think most people fundamentally get it. And remember, we've got a good history with it. We had a very boom and bust banking system before 1933. We put some good regulations in place, and we got 50 years without a major crash, 50 years when we built and strengthened America's middle class. It worked for us. And then we started pulling those threads out and letting the financial institutions take on more and more risk, and we ended up paying a big price for it. Now, we got to get that risk out of the system.
There was a Democratic senator a Democratic president, President Clinton, who signed the repeal of Glass-Steagall into law.
That's right. That's right. And I think it was wrong. But do keep in mind, because this is important, by the time they repealed it in 1999, Glass-Steagall was a shadow of its former self. The regulators had repeatedly put one loophole in after another. So I'm not letting anybody off the hook on this. It was a weakened Glass-Steagall law, and then finally they killed it off. We need a strong Glass-Steagall. And if you let me put in a pitch for it, that's what our 21st century Glass-Steagall law does. It doesn't just use the same language from 1933. It tightens it up harder. It takes those loopholes that got created and it stitches them all closed. And it says new kinds of financial instruments that didn't even exist back in 1933. It explicitly calls them out to say, no, they are not part of commercial
Credit default swaps, derivatives, things like that.
Exactly right.
Senator Elizabeth Warren, thanks for joining Fox Business today.
Thank you. It's good to be here.